It's August 29th, 2023. You're listening to the Beer Temple Podcast.
Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.
Hello, and welcome to the Beer Temple Podcast. I'm your co-host, Chris Quinn, and I am joined by your other co-host, Mike Shalal. You laugh every time I intro this show. Every time.
It makes me happy. We're doing the show.
Yeah, and, it's just rolls off my tongue.
I mean, you're a natural.
Yeah.
290-something shows in.
Yeah, well, how many of those was I literally having to read a script?
I never made fun of you for that, though.
Probably 200 of them. Yeah, I think you did, actually.
Every time.
Yeah, you made fun of me a lot for having to do that. And you also saw what happened, and you still see what happens when I don't have a literal script to read off of. So
that's how you know we're alive, you know?
That's right. Beautiful fade in from the Fade Master.
The best.
I will say.
The most talented.
I mean, best there ever was? I don't know. Best there ever will be, you know?
The fadiest of all time.
He's like the natural. He's like the Roy Hobbs of fading.
That's right. He chiseled that board out of a tree that was struck by lightning.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Fade Boy, it says on it. Anyway, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. Busy time of year for me and probably for most other people that work at or run breweries.
Why's that?
It's the summer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like more people buying, especially saisons.
It's the slow season for us.
Oh, for real?
Yep, always is.
Reverse splits.
Yep.
And also August 16th was our fourth anniversary of when we did our first release here at the Beer Temple.
It was this last week. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It was
Congratulations to you too.
Anniversary this past week. Maybe it might have been literally August 16th. It might be. We might have the same anniversary
of
the tap room.
Of
this location.
Yeah. Huge.
Yeah.
Huge if true.
It was definitely in the past 10 days or so, or 2 weeks, let's say.
Yeah.
10 days wouldn't be the 16th, but
right.
I think it's pretty close.
I told, people keep saying, oh, congratulations. I'm like, it just means I haven't quit. There's no, it's not like I'm, getting older in, any real way.
You haven't lost
I haven't stopped, right?
You haven't stopped trying.
The best way to have another anniversary is to not quit.
Right.
The best one I've figured out so far.
So 4 years. Sweet. Congrats, man.
Yeah, we made a batch of Wilby. It's our flagship beer. We do it every August and then maybe once another time a year.
Cool.
So it started it all.
Yep.
It's still my favorite beer we make, if I'm being perfectly honest. Yeah. This batch is really good, too.
I got to say, I like Levain quite a bit.
Thank you.
This beer I'm drinking right now reminds me a little bit of Levain. It's the Surf Cast from Oxbow.
Is there citrus in that?
There's a little bit of lime in it. Yeah.
Nice.
Lime and salt, but it doesn't have that, margarita beer thing that many other beers that have salt and lime in it do.
Sure.
In fact, I don't even think I would have identified that necessarily had I hadn't known it or hadn't said it on there. So it's really good.
Nice. I've got a beer with citrus in it too. Drinking the Beacon from
with yuzu.
With yuzu, a collaboration from Afterthought and Penrose.
That's right. Yeah, we had. They were in. Excuse me. I think it was 2 weeks ago. I believe maybe it was last week. I forget. We've had a couple.
It was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and then last week we did an event with Middlebrow. Pete from Middlebrow came in and was tasting out some of his wines. I don't know if you've had his wines lately.
I haven't yet.
They're really good.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was...
They're talented people.
Yeah, they're
they
really
do a good
cool.
job.
Yeah, and then we had our pale ale contest,
Right.
which you were a judge on the first round of.
Yep. Very qualified judge.
Yes, very qualified judge. So we had more people taste for the Pale Ale finals than we did for the Pilsner.
I guess that makes sense.
I suppose it was like almost 60 people came in and judged blind, and nobody. I think only one person judged both the first round and the second round. So
Like
that
someone
was kind of cool.
When it was 32 beers, someone
Yeah.
came and did that, and then came back for another dose.
Yeah, did the 7. Yeah,
Nice.
So that was cool. We announced the winner today. It was. Do you know who it was?
It's Cosmo, right?
Yeah, Cosmo from Noon Whistle also won the first round. That was the most
Back-to-back
highly
champ.
rated, pale ale of the initial round as well. So
That didn't happen with the Pilsners, right? It was
No.
the 2 different beers.
yeah, it was 2 different beers. The beer that won the first round did not end up. It went to the finals, obviously, but it didn't go on and win.
Didn't
win
have
the whole
that killer
thing.
instinct.
Yeah,
Just happy to be there.
I was just happy to be there.
It also, I think that beer had won every GABF medal for the last 10 years, so it was just like, what is this competition of?
Well, it was a competition that
Take
didn't
it out.
win.
Yeah, right.
That's for sure. But yeah, so Cosmo, which is interesting. I don't think we've ever had that beer on draft ever. And I think the beer that came in third was the Sketchbook No Parking. I'm not even sure if we carry it in the store. So, I mean, we're going to now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to.
And then Grid from Hot Butcher came in second.
Sure.
So,
I was surprised personally at how much kind of the new school hazy inflected pale ales appealed to me during the blind tasting.
yeah. And you also saw that local ruled the day. I mean,
Yeah.
all the beers that made the finals were local. Now, some of the beers in the first round that were some of my favorites were some of the more old school ones, like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale and Dale's Pale were 2 of my highest rated, but they didn't make it through.
When you're tasting like 32 beers like that, they kind of get chunked together for me.
Right.
Like there was a group where I'm like, I know Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is one of these, and that all the rest of these are kind of trying to be Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't tell. It was like probably 7 of the 30 that I was like, these are all within, the same field.
Yeah.
And it was hard to tell which one was the best one in that then, and then you kind of just were like, none of these could be the best if they're all
Of
that
those
similar.
old school styles, the one, it's kind of a new school version of that old school, is Alpha King, and it made it through to the finals. And we've done it in the past where we were trying to find a beer that when we couldn't get Sierra Nevada Pale Ale on draft, which beer were we going to do? So we took like 6 or 7 different pale ales, and we tasted them all blind here, like off the record. We were just like, okay, what's going to be the other beer? And we had Dale's and Mirror Pond and a whole bunch of them. Alpha King won. So, which is why it's on now, because we don't have Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. But now maybe we'll do Noon Whistle.
Yeah, I got to be honest, like,
It's 5% versus 6.6 for Alpha King, so I think it makes more sense as a pale ale, really. But
sure.
yeah,
I still don't think I'm going to drink less Sierra Nevada or Alpha King or any of those,
Yeah.
even though I had them ranked lower than
yeah,
a lot of the hazy inflected ones.
yeah. I think I might have had them both ranked similar or higher than Cosmo, but I had Cosmo ranked high.
Yeah.
In my first round, but yeah, so that was cool. That was cool to see that, and people coming in, and we had a lot of walk-ins. We had a lot of people coming in and like seeing what was going on and wanting to participate in it, and
Nice.
that was cool. So
Hell yeah.
yes. But anyway, I digress. That's not what we're
On
here
this
for.
show?
Yeah. So we've been trying to do an indie distributor show for how long would you say, Mike? How long have we been talking about doing it anyway?
When did I start co-hosting
Right.
the podcast?
Right. I mean, probably not literally that long.
I mean, no, I think when we started, like, we should have ones that were specific to like brewer, distribution, publican, like
Right.
beer buyer. Like that was one of the first things where like when we branch out and do different types of shows, that we should do one with each specific kind of tier.
And we've been trying for quite a while to do it. Mm-hmm. And today's the day where we give up on having a panel.
Yeah, I think we're just going to have to do them individually.
But the good news is we have a guest from the world of indie distribution. And I'm excited to learn from him about what's going on because he's, I think the newest player that I'm aware of in the Chicago market, and has been doing some really exciting stuff and has brought back some of your and my favorite beers to the market. So I'm quite excited, and just a long-time beer guy that I like. So I'm excited, but I would say who it is, but I can't because it would be breaking with tradition, because first-time guests always introduce themselves. So with that, Mr. Tyrell, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell everyone who you are.
Hi, Aaron Tyrell. I'm with Oath Distributing, Chicago.
All right. Short and sweet. There you go.
Yeah.
What is Oath? Well, thanks for coming on, Aaron. What's up?
Oh, yeah. Glad to be here. Yeah. I was going to listen to you talk about how long you guys have been putting together a indie distro panel. And I figured that this would have been like something you guys have already done or you do yearly or something like that.
We did it one other time. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited to be here. I was excited about the idea of just talking to other people in this side in tier 2 and like this part of the business, because it's to me it continues to just be like such an interesting vantage point of the whole craft beer scene, beer culture, and what it's evolved into. I don't even know if it's just craft beer anymore that I distribute.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And can you give just a little bit of history of your career in craft beer? Because I think I've known you for 10 years now. I was
going to say, do you remember the first time we met?
I remember some of the first times. I don't know if it's the exact first time. When was the first time we met?
The first time I remember meeting you was before you started the store, and it was at a buddy of ours, Phil.
Oh, okay. Phil Cool.
Lived right around the corner from where I lived in Lincoln Square. But he was, I think, just off there. And we were up in it was him and his girlfriend and wife now had this party, and you
came in
and let me know you were opening a beer store soon.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah.
I worked for a brewery at the time, and
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we've known each other for quite a while. And then
I'm pretty sure I met you at a tasting when you were working for Stone at a grocery store in like 2011. But now that we obviously haven't kept the same relationship, but I remember like my girlfriend at the time was like, "Oh, Mike's favorite brewery is Stone." And I was like, "Oh, I love your beer so much," and I was at the time.
That's cool.
It was exciting. Yeah. I remember those. I mean, that's pretty much when I landed in Chicago. Was when I was with Stone Brewing Company.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I was so excited to open the Chicago market for the brewery. Predating that, I'd worked at a distributor in Michigan, a large distributor, and then before that, worked for a little distributor, and before that was a publican and I had a music venue. Before that, I was a DJ, and worked at Kinko's,
paper route.
Paper out, and pretty much. I mean, before that, I was a dishwasher at a Lebanese restaurant at 12 years old. But it was, I think, like, if I take it all the way back, music is kind of what got me into craft beer. It was that DJing gig at a nightclub. I did that for about 5 years, from when I was like 19. for 5 years going into that. But where I got into craft beer was one of the bartenders owned a brewery called Stony Creek Brewery out of Rochester, Michigan, and they were probably best known for this vanilla coffee porter.
Okay.
1994, five.
Yeah, I wasn't even in Chicago at the time, so
No, where were you?
I was in Philadelphia. Yeah, actually, I was in Delaware County at the time, graduating high school in '95. So
I was in
that's where I
kindergarten.
was. Yeah, yeah. I didn't move to Chicago until I think 2002. Yeah, 2001, 2002, something like that. So been here a while, but not that long.
That's a good amount of time.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you worked with Oath in Michigan, right?
Mm-hmm. I did, yeah.
And then how? So then, yeah. How did Oath come to Illinois? And because it's an interesting. It's not typical. It's not where you have multiple little distributors who are in different states, at least. So can you just give a little bit of a rundown of like Oath's makeup and how it came into the Chicago market?
I think to like just how it came to the Chicago market is kind of the overall story of like what inspired it to happen. I think that just before getting into independent distribution, like as like starting one, and as like my occupation, I was doing consulting for anyone, but mostly it ended up being small to medium sized breweries.
Okay.
And I just travel, and I went to a couple breweries out east. One was Night Shift Brewery, and they had started a distribution arm there. And I was there to talk to them about, I was actually working with a really small distributor in Michigan who was looking to speak with Night Shift about coming to Michigan. I ended up having like this great conversation with those guys after the meeting about distribution, because we had talked about how I'd worked with Stone, who is in one of those states, California, where you can be a brewery, self-distribute, but also distribute other brands. And that's really unique for those who don't understand how the tiers work. Like in Illinois, for instance, a brewery can only self-distribute its own beers, not anyone else's beers. So in California, you could do your own beers and other people's beers. So they had a really robust distribution arm in California at Stone, and I ended up talking to those guys for a little bit about that, and just my experience there, and then some of my experience working with distribution. And I was really impressed with them. Like, wow, what you guys are doing is really cool. Like, in a lot of my consulting was really this language barrier between breweries and distributors, and understanding each other, and the stalemate that was going on, where like they were just fighting. So it seemed like a lot of fighting and a lot of misunderstanding, where they weren't even doing their jobs. Like the distributors weren't distributing, and the breweries felt they crippled or, jailed, kind of like, and they just weren't talking about it. So it ended up like that. Like there was just no movement. So what I noticed was that there was a really a gap in like access to market if you weren't self-distributing, which a lot of breweries were looking, if they could, to do that at the time, or open up multiple tap rooms. And I guess this would be like 2016 or 2017.
Yeah.
So as soon as I got back to Michigan, there was an article that came out about, I was in Beer Advocate about small distributors, and it was an interview with the guys at Night Shift. And I was like, oh, I just saw this guy, and just kind of what they say, it was said about distribution inspired me about this small distribution. And it wasn't like something I wanted to really like do my whole life, like an ad, I started a distributor like a dream, like, that is my dream. It just
little 5-year-old Aaron, like I can't wait to own my own distributorship.
Oh yeah, because I working with breweries, I'd worked with a lot of distributors. I worked with at Stone, I had 26 different distributors that I worked with all over the country. I mean, I had a lot of people that helped me. It was not anything I could handle on my own, but they ranged from very big distributors to small distributors. So kind of got to work with a wide range, but I was seeing this consolidation in Illinois. There's a lot of that happening as far back as, 2015, 2014. So as it just seemed to continue to happen. And I saw this blind spot and I'm like, if no one else is going to do it, like who's going to do it? So that's when I started
getting interesting.
And then in Illinois, the reason that, going back to your question, like Illinois is totally selfish, kind of like self-motivated. Like I wanted to go back to Illinois because I had met so many people when I lived in Chicago, and I kept those connections going. And I was just like, I saw the gap there too. And I'm like, oh man, I always wanted to go back. And that was the catalyst for doing the Oath Chicago.
Got it. So yeah, it's interesting saying like I never dreamed of getting into distribution. I was thinking about who does and who is running these distribution companies, and it's a family business often.
The Wirtzes.
I mean, yeah, the Glunzes, the Wirtzes. Yeah. I mean, if you start looking in the Chicagoland area, so many of them are or very recently were family businesses, including the largest beer distributor in the country, right. Reyes. It's a privately owned family business because you don't give up something that sweet when you're a bud house. You hold on to that for dear life, and it's probably one of the closer things to being able to hand down like your like royalty,
dynasty.
Like a dynasty. You can just like hand it down to the generations.
So you're thinking they're gonna like televise the Reyes' weddings or something soon?
Yes, exactly.
One's gonna leave the family, and it's gonna be a whole scandal,
right? Or hopefully it isn't like with other dynasties where there's some sort of like crazy overthrow, and then there's a new family in charge. And, I don't think that can happen anymore.
Game of Thrones, but for beer distributors,
right?
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. Like that's so. My experience is the same as what you're describing. Like I would go around the country. And working for Stone, I got treated really well because the brewery was so admired by so many people, and I just was, I was like the physical form of like their admiration. So I got that. I also got like if they were pissed about a beer not being right or something like that, I got that too. But that was rare. I mean, it was mostly like, oh man, it was great to be in that, but I didn't make the beers or anything like that. But it kind of felt kind of rock star back then. Like there wasn't as many breweries, so just where you could be regional and get treated really well. So and the reason to preface that is because distributors, these big distributor or old families of these big houses would treat you so well just simply on the name recognition of like, oh, you must be somebody because our sales manager's heard of you or whatever. A lot of times the patriarch of the family business wouldn't sit in a meeting with me, kind of like duck in like at the kids table, like, hey, hope you guys
right. That's interesting. It's like in the movie Air. I don't know if you've seen it. I
haven't seen it.
Yeah, but it's they talk about when they're trying to pitch Jordan on signing with Nike instead of Adidas. And it was like very staged that the owner of Nike, is it Knight?
Phil
Knight. Like it was orchestrated. Like he would dip in after the meeting had started and say hi. That's exactly what it kind of reminds me of. That's what you were saying, Aaron. So Oath started in Michigan, is that right? And were you part of it when it started, or did you come on, or how did that go?
I was. It started in the back of a Honda Civic, or I'm sorry, Honda Element that I bought.
You better get this right, Civic or Element. Yeah.
I was going to say, like, the Element was a car that I bought specifically in Chicago because it was like the perfect vehicle for parking.
Right.
Plastic front and back. It's boxy. You could stack cases, kegs perfectly. So I took that to Michigan, and that's where it started. And then we built brands up there, and some of them, after building it up, talked to some brands that were interested in coming over, and then being a different market, that some of the brands that weren't here yet were not franchised that we couldn't represent in other states. So I wanted to do something in Illinois, and that's what got things started here.
And when you say not franchised, can you just describe what to people what that means for some people? I'm sure some people out there know what it means, but maybe some others don't.
The franchise rules protect the wholesaler. They're meant to protect the wholesaler. They're state regulated rules that different from other types of food. Like coffee, for instance, you can have several distributors distributing the same coffee, and they can undercut pricing. They can do just about anything, and you can have several of them kind of competing. So that kind of keeps us in that regard, keeps like this level playing ground on pricing. In beer or in alcohol in franchise states, franchise rights are awarded to one distributor, and that distributor has the rights within that assigned territory, whether it be a county, a state, or however the borders are described in a document. And it's usually an agreement or a contract, basically.
Yeah.
And it holds you hold the rights to the exclusive rights to sell that product in that area.
Yeah, and I think that's universal across the entire country, right? That's a federal rule. It seems like there's nowhere where one brewery can be represented by two different distributors in the same location that I know of.
Yeah,
anyway.
I have no idea.
Do you know
DC.
of it? DC.
Oh, well,
okay.
DC's the Wild West.
Right.
I mean, I'm making this up because I don't know. It's only what I've heard, but I heard like the land in DC isn't, you can't own land in DC. It's like
right.
anything goes, it's like it's the Wild Wild West.
Yeah. Okay. So Washington D.C. Aside, where they also have taxation without representation, and it's weird there.
They really oppressed those people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those Georgetownians. So you said that, and we'll get into the indie part of it shortly, but you said something about franchise law. You said it protects the distributor. I've heard also sometimes that people say that it protects the brewer as well, but I'm just curious, in your mind, why franchise law is good for a distributor, why a one-to-one relationship is a good thing for beer, if you do think it is a good thing for beer, and why, just how you feel about it.
Well, I mean, it's opinion. I think on both sides.
Yeah.
Like, first off, about what you're saying on it protecting the breweries and I'm saying distributors. I mean, I've been on both sides. Like I've had the experience of being in all three tiers. First as like a publican and at a music venue and working with craft beer, then in the distribution, then in the supply side, then kind of freelancing and doing all this. And I've had different attitudes over the years. I've made amends on some of those. So as when I was a supplier, and then I move over to the distribution side, I'm like, oh man, I was such a jerk or asshole. I mean, I probably lived up to all the stuff that I knew that, when I was leaving that room, what those guys were thinking. But I think it's, we're all working to do the same thing, and that's like sell the beers, sell the products. I mean, I say beer a lot because that's like what really attracted me and keeps me involved in. I'm just such a big fan of beer. Like I just fell in love with it when I was working at the bars, and it was like finding, a certain genre of music that you just went your whole life with. It was like beer was just this exciting thing that opened up to me, and I wanted to know everything about it. Read every book, Michael Jackson's book. I went out and tried to get every beer I could and learned as much as I could about the histories, and within those histories is the franchise rules that we have, this tier system in the United States that is a product of prohibition. So after Prohibition, the government allowed people to start drinking again. It started, the first beverage that was allowed was beer, which probably everyone probably knows all this stuff, but um, they wanted to keep organized crime out of uh, alcohol. They also wanted to maintain this kind of like maintain just the checks and balances on the safety of the public. So there's a governed in each state. There's a different governing body that like oversees us in the alcohol business and make sure that the public is safe. That's like their main objective, but it has to do with those Prohibition era rules, and that's why we.
And why do you think it's a good thing for? How does it protect distributors? I guess is
How does it protect distributors?
Yeah.
It protects the distributors. So like a brewery. So a brewery can't just could feasibly not just leave a distributor. So let's say you're distributing just a handful of products, and your main brewery just leaves. So
Right.
everyone that you employ, your whole, it's a big chunk of your business. So
Right.
for them to leave could put you out of business, and
Of course.
that's where those rules were rooted. Was like, you
And the opposite way. I mean, I assume if a distributor all of a sudden just dropped a brand, it could leave them. I guess they can't kind of do that.
That's
But
the whole thing. You can't do that.
a distributor can't drop
a brewery can't leave if they get shelved. If a distributor just kind of stops selling your beer, you can't do anything about it.
Ah, right. So it works one. That's right. It works one way, and it
one
goes
way.
forever, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
But you can buy yourself out usually,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's usually a clause in there that you could buy yourself out at a multiple times gross profit based on a amount of time that you're with the distributor.
And this kind of gets to what you were mentioning before. You were saying, there was a lot of miscommunication or arguing, and you said distributors weren't distributing. And is that kind of what you were getting at? Is that they were maybe not shelving, but in so many words, maybe not pushing some of these beers, and these these breweries felt like they had were being held back by some of these distributors, and felt like if they were in a different situation, be it self-distro or with another distribution house, that they could be selling more beer. Is that I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I took from it when you said distributors weren't distributing. I mean, I don't know what else. Maybe it meant something else.
Yeah. I think that it was. So I'd worked on being like this vantage point of working at a distributor before going to the supply side. That's how I got my job on the supply side. Was I would have been what they call poached by a brewery that I was courting for distribution, and I ended up not getting them distribution rights for us, and ended up getting a job with the brewery. So when I went over to the brewery, I got to see that side of it. And on the distribution side, I think there's a point where I don't think it's there wasn't any purpose for not selling a certain brand. Like, wasn't like, those guys, I don't like those guys beer, so I'm not going to sell it. But I could see on the supply side, some breweries felt that way. Like, I've heard them verbally say that, that would be some of my clients would be like, it's not selling me. I think that they have something against me. And that often was, as a consultant in between that, my job was, I was like, well, I've been on both sides. And I'm like, I've been on the distributor side. Sometimes it's just like, I just got so much going on. Like,
right.
And sometimes you don't get the communication from the brewery. Like, are you giving them a plan? Are you giving them a brewing schedule of what you're making and what's for sale and when, how much it is, like a clear idea how much it is, and then your go-to-market plan? Or are you just like, made beer, pick it up, and then you just don't want to see it?
Right.
That's what you
do. You take it from here. Yeah, right. You take it from here.
So I think I might have simplified it by saying not distribute, but I think there is truth in that, because it like lands, the distributors do pick that up and then they put it in the warehouse and you're like, it's over there. Why aren't you selling it, guys? Like, why isn't it moving? And I think that's like that disconnect is like, sometimes they just don't know how, and they're not asking. So they got so much going on. They're going to go to the next thing. Like the sales reps, if that communication doesn't come from the top down, like, this is the plan, guys. We're selling, these brands. Or sometimes the plan might be, like focused on, some of the top selling brands might take the majority of the attention. So its share of mind is like what a brewery wants to get from a distributor.
Mm-hmm.
So we started Oath. My idea there was that, okay, these big distributors who have more brands than they might know they even have. Like they might even
Right.
know that they're not selling your brewery's beer, and you're a small brewery. Like, I want to have something where I know everybody, and I know, like, when we go in, we could talk about everything sensibly. So you have to have, in our case, we were looking at the brands with a lot of education. Like, we knew who we were talking to. We were very purposeful with who we were speaking to. Like, I wasn't just going for, and I'll use this as Stone as an example. When I was with Stone, they were talking to everybody that they
Sure.
read in the magazine. Like, distributors were calling up, every brewery. A lot of times I would sit in these meetings and they didn't even know what we made,
They just knew Stone.
They would confuse us with, like, they would sometimes, like, say a Dogfish Head beer name to me, like, oh yeah, you guys make that 120
60-minute, yeah, right.
Yeah. Or yeah, name some stuff. I'm like, no, but I'd register in my head. I'm like, okay, they don't know who we are. So this meeting in my head is it's over. Like, and we'd interview everybody. And that's what I encourage suppliers to do. And when I was in the consulting side, and I encourage them now, like, check us out and check me out, check our, salespeople out. Like, you can ask around, that's what we set out to do, was to be able to have a catalog that we knew everything that was in it. And
Mm-hmm.
that it was meant, like, I didn't have 10 different IPAs because IPAs are cool. It was like, I have two breweries. One makes hazy IPAs. Is like that's their focus. I don't need it. I don't need two or three of those. I just need, that, so we could talk about that brewery. That's our hazy IPA brewery. And this is our, Belgian style brewery. And this is our
Sure.
imports. This is our other stuff. So,
And it's interesting you say that, because when you were saying before, some of the suppliers were complaining, they don't like me not selling my beer, and that it's more complicated than that. I think it is more complicated, or it may be more complicated than that. But it's also just facts that when somebody asks, if an account asks a distributor rep, do you have any fruited IPAs? They might have three of them, but they're probably going to answer the same one first every time. And it might be because somebody had a brewing schedule that somebody had dropped something off for them. It might be just top of mind. It might be that's what their boss is telling them to push. Or it could just be that's the one that they remember and they forget about the other two because their book is so big. But, there are maybe two other breweries that also have fruited IPAs that just are, and that's what they talk about getting buried, maybe intentionally, maybe unintentionally, maybe a combination of those things. So it's interesting that it seems very top of mind for Oath, at least, to maybe keep that to a minimum. I mean, it's obvious that I think a distributor who literally only has one of a certain style, especially something as popular as IPA, is probably not the smartest thing. But
when you were starting Oath in Illinois, what did you want to put together as far as a portfolio to start out? Were there specific, like, breweries you wanted? Were there things that you saw kind of that were shelved at other places? Were there breweries from out of state that weren't here yet that you thought would work? Like, what was the mix you tried to put together there?
And also to add to that, and was it? Did you see it differently than what was happening at the time in Michigan?
Yes. Well, I'll start off by saying, like, what I did see with Illinois was that I felt that we could bring in some out of state breweries and producers in general, like that. You know, I'll take cider. We had some great craft cider partners that bring fruit from other parts of the country that is completely different from what we see in the Midwest. So, you know, like I saw like a lot of different things, like of suppliers that we were working with out of state that I thought would be really cool to offer in Illinois. So, saw that as a way to start, and wasn't afraid of the fact that we didn't really have like a local brewery, which is when, you know, to answer your question about what I intended to do was to work with local breweries to give a distribution platform or a voice for them to go to market, because I saw the winds change as far as what small breweries and really small breweries go to market plan was. It was no longer necessarily like, I'm going to make the beer and self-distribute, like fuck them, you know, like no one, I'm going to do it myself. If they, you know, these guys can't figure it out, I know how to sell my beer.
Right.
And I think Illinois has some great regulations, some great laws to allow breweries to do that. States like Michigan and other states that have more restricted, like Michigan just started self-distribution not too long ago. I think it was 2017 or something like that. But they just the first run at it, it was very limiting. It was like 2,000 barrels, and that you could self-distribute. And then after that, you had to go find a distributor.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, now you're like kind of out to sea, and you sell these 2,000 barrels, and then, you know, at the 2,001st barrel, you have to find a distributor. Now you're splitting that profit you were making on that 2,000 barrels.
Right.
And did you have a plan for that? Probably not. I mean, they since expanded that. They figured out like, oh man, that's too limiting. Illinois has a nice size, like ceiling for growth for self-distributing breweries. And I think that's a lot to do with the guild, because that was happening back in 2000, you know, 13, 14, maybe earlier than that. When I was here, I was, you know, hearing how the guild is working hard on those self-distribution rules.
Yeah,
so
I think it's 7,500.
that's part of the growth here. What's that?
It's 7,500. You can self-distribute here. We can make up to 15,000. You can self-distribute that 7,500. After 15,000, I think you have to find a distributor for all of it.
That's a
It's
nice
a lot.
size.
It's a lot of beer.
That's a nice size brewery, and by then you're making a choice, because now you're building. You're going to have a couple vans. I mean, you're really building like another business. So
Yeah.
I think there's there's that fork in the road where you're like, I either do two really different businesses at the same time, or I do the one that I set out to do. And you know, 9 times out of 10, it's like brewing. You know, like I did this to make beer. So then it's like find a partner that can represent you, and then take that business that you've built and represent it well. So
for you, sorry.
No, that's it.
So you were saying when you went into Illinois that you were starting out with mostly non-local brands, and I didn't quite catch if that was the intent or something that you had planned to change. Could you just talk a little bit more about what you were coming to Illinois with and why?
That was the plan when we arrived in Illinois. It was during COVID, so I saw like just a lot of things changing. It was like the worst time, but probably like also the perfect time to kind of build what we were doing, because it slowed down, like it slowed down everything, so we could kind of really take a look at the plan. My initial plan was to do similar to what was done in Michigan, where we brought a lot of out-of-state brands in, and we kind of served that purpose. We were a way for out-of-state brands, small brands, to come into a state where it was very crowded with local, and local was very prominent. Like that actually deterred a lot of out-of-state brands from wanting to come into a state that's that's got so many strong local brands where they're like, man, Michigan's scary. Like that's what I would hear a lot. So I knew that going into distribution there. So I thought, well, there's already a lot of, and I didn't really know the whole landscape, so I'm not going to pretend like I did. Like, I knew everybody here. I really did want to just come back into the beer scene here because that's what I love about, that's what keeps me in the business is the people, mainly the people in this industry, in craft beer specifically. So I wanted to get back in to this scene in Illinois, and I just felt that there was that missing here too, because I didn't see these brands represented here, and I saw them grow in another market, and I'm like, well, why not? Why couldn't it go there? And then, we would be another outlet for the local brands, hopefully breweries that didn't exist yet, to distribution, because I knew there was a robust self-distribution scene going on here with the local breweries. I felt that at some point, if they're going to if they want to make a choice to go into distribution, an option like us would be great. This is a great time to be that. So, our hope was to be there for local breweries who, just need like a start, or they just want it. They no longer want to self-distribute. They no longer want to work with buying trucks and maintaining vehicles and managing salespeople, and want to focus on the beer and be an answer to that.
So when you started, how many brands did you have when you opened the doors?
10.
10? Would you name some of them just so people out there know who you represent?
We started with a lot of cider. So we had Ancho cider. We brought in, I think who else we brought in Lime. Well, we didn't bring in Lime Ventures, but we took over Lime Ventures during that time, which is an import company that has a lot of like amazing beers, legendary breweries. So that was
the old Shelton book, right?
Yeah.
Or a good chunk of
it. Along with like, Lime has other stuff that they've added and been adding. They're a distributor out west, so they have a distribution arm in California, along with like import company out there, and then an import company on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Now we have one of the East Coast guys lives here in Illinois, and which is awesome. I mean, it's kind of just increased the presence of that portfolio, but that portfolio really grew for us here because a lot of it was already established, and then it's kind of like a lot of people said the import market was really soft, and that it was really tough to work with imports, but it seemed like the beers in that portfolio were like these lost breweries and varietals that people were like, no, we want it more than ever. Like when we bought Dry Fontaine back, it was like a desert of like it just soaking up rain. Like everybody's like, yes, oh my god.
We talk a lot about beers in that portfolio and being things that are foundational to both of our craft beer experiences.
Yeah,
but we also brought from the Midwest, Ohio brewery, Urban Artifact, who does fruited sours, and I just think the way that they do it is it's so much fruit. It's like like only they have these contracts to do a lot of to work with as much of these certain fruits that they are working with, and the sours are just that's all they do. So it's it's fun to work, bring them to Illinois, and I think like those were kind of like our like the big focus when just coming in. There's others that I'm trying to think of them, because we had so many that like I think something that should be explained is like these deals don't like happen super fast all the time. Like sometimes we're talking to breweries for years before they come in the market. Sometimes it's weeks, like if Beer Temple's having a party and
and so you start.
That's true. Yeah, I remember some of those. You've helped out, and that's interesting. That's another. I'm sorry. Were you going to say something, Mike?
Go ahead.
It is an interesting point. I wanted to get into, and maybe we'll do it later. About some of the kind of unique, like holes that these indie distributors fill, and one of them is these like. like last minute, like smaller deals, and I was curious. Like, yeah, you brought in some Hill Farmstead, yeah, for Half Acre and us, and yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine like Reyes having any interest, and frankly, Hill Farmstead having any interest
in doing it with Reyes.
In doing it with Reyes. So, I mean, I think without someone like Oath, that wouldn't have happened. I was just curious, like, from your standpoint, you know, maybe not like specifically in that instance, but just generally, like, why do you want to do stuff like that? Because
Well,
it's great. It's
comes
great for that
down
moment.
to-
Yeah.
we're pretty good at it. Like we're pretty good at being like really nimble and turning on a dime. Like if you imagine like these bigger distributors being like a giant aircraft carrier, it takes a while for those guys to turn and pivot into something where we can just we're like a little speedboat. Like we could just turn around, pick you up, and throw you back on your skis and get you out. It's it's fun. Like it's fun to us. Like be able to do that stuff. Now it's another reason they probably don't do it is it's not profitable. So you got to really be into what you're doing. I mean, to be on the phone with like someone like Sean Hill or like to talk and communicate with these guys, it's like the equivalent of like, you know, a Rolling Stones fan talking to Mick Jagger. It's like, oh man, this is
Yeah.
cool. We're talking about like boring shit like taxes and, you know, compliance and things like that. But we're talking and just having a great conversation. I got to know someone that I just never thought I would have the occasion to talk to, and had you know, just worship from afar, like, oh man, and come to find out, you know, like all kinds of cool stuff about them. And we were doing that for years. I mean, that's kind of, I think that's kind of like what we got really good at. And as small distributors that, as I knew them in like 2016, 2017 is like what we call like pulse selling or splash selling, where we would like go to maybe 50 accounts and we'd sell 10 cases of you know, maybe one pallet, 100 cases, and 10 cases to like 50 places. And the fans knew where to go. It was kind of like this whole deal. Like everyone had to play their part in order for this to work, but the fans knew where to go. We'd bring the beer in, everyone knew it would come in. It wouldn't go on the shelf. It just go like right in an end cap, right out front. It was like, this is so cool. Like we don't have to fight shelf space. We just bring it in, drop it. It's gone. Customers hear about it. They come in your store. Boom, it's gone. And we, that's all we did. And that for a long time, starting out in Michigan. And that's kind of where, like, when COVID hit, that's kind of what kind of, it slowed that down. And then also some of the smaller breweries got bigger, and in that growth, they focused on kind of more traditional core building and, you know, working on, really working on the craft. So, when we do festivals and things like that, we got really good at it, you know, just that drop, we get you compliance, all that stuff done. And, boom.
Yeah, it's fun. It's funny that we've, well, and I say we, I think Mike and I have talked about, trying to get a splash drop from, Fatheads in Ohio, and they're just a little too big to want to do something like that. I mean, I guess Half Acre is a little bit bigger than they are, or about the same size. And they used to do
different
splash.
vibes as companies, though.
Right. But it is funny. Like, you have to have that perfect kind of type of brewer and the distributor to kind of want to do that stuff. And I mean, we're thankful because it is fun and exciting, and it's cool to do that sort of thing.
How much Fathead do you think you could sell here? Just one
Here?
store, yeah.
And one in how long?
Are we talking like Roadhouse numbers?
No. I don't think we could sell that much. But I think we could do, in like a drop, I think we could probably do, 2 or 3 pallets
So that's a lot.
in a drop. I think of that brewery. One time, the first time.
Okay, what would the split be between Benjamin Danklin and Headhunter?
Well, I'd have to break out my pivot chart.
It's around the 4th of July, so
Right,
probably
exactly.
a little bit more Danklin heavy.
Exactly.
I mean, everything, yeah. I mean, that's what. So I mean, I guess that's where I think we, distributors like us we'll make it work, and and we may bring that brewery in once a quarter, maybe twice a year. Maybe we'll only bring him in once a year. Maybe we'll only bring him that once and never again.
Right.
But that's okay.
Sure.
Which is totally not traditional. So
yeah,
we're non-traditional. I think that's something about independent distributors. I don't want to speak for everybody, but just the ones I've talked to are non-traditional in that sense that we offer different services that bigger guys can't fathom or they can't do.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit more. It might be a good time. I'm going to freshen my beer up, maybe take 5 minutes if that's okay with you, Mike.
Fine with me.
Okay. And then we'll come back, and I do want to talk about some of those kind of more unique roles that indie distributors play, and you hope will continue to play as the market kind of goes through what it's going through right now. So, because I personally think that indie distro is going to be more important now and going forward than it has been in a while. So, all right, let's talk about that when we come back in a couple minutes with more of the Beer Temple podcast.
And we're back. Welcome back to the Beer Temple podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike Schlau of Is Was Brewing, here with your other co-host, Chris Quinn of the Beer Temple.
Yep.
And Aaron Tyrell of Oath Distributing in Chicago and Detroit. Well, you're from specifically the Illinois chapter of the
Yes.
crew.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're talking about indie distro.
Yeah, we're talking about splash drops. We went and got refills.
Splash.
And we were talking about, just that whole scene. And I think those drops are still gonna play a part, but it's interesting. We talk about how the beer market, the craft beer market specifically, independent of overall beer, is it's contracting or slowing greatly if it is growing, but it is down. It seems like it's down a little bit, and I'm just interested what role you think that your style of distribution will play in the market that we're in now. I mean, we're not in the days where someone hears that you're from a brewery and treats you like a rock star, except if you're from maybe one or two breweries, in the country right now,
Fatheads.
Right, exactly. Right. And those one or two breweries probably aren't taking meetings. I don't think they're too interested in opening golf courses and stuff like that. Like with Treehouse. But so those days are not here, and they're not going to be back in the foreseeable future. Breweries are closing, and what role do you think indie distro has? Because I think a lot of people are kind of they're kind of coming back to, it seems like one of the plays anyway is to kind of draw back in and kind of come to a smaller geographical region around where you are. I don't know. I'm kind of babbling now. You want to add anything to this, Mike? No.
Were you getting to a question?
Yeah. What role? I said the question I think 7 times and then just kept talking rather than shut up.
Framing it in. I think you're framing it in because it's getting it's got me thinking about a lot of what I think about every day, because that stream of consciousness isn't like, I think when I was selling for the brewery at that time, it was like I mean, the only beer was IPA. It was only about, craft beer scene was only about beer, and it seemed like it was only about IPA, and it was how bitter could it be, and then we talked about IBUs, and like the hops had more importance than anything else to do with the beer, how, almost the, how the detriment of how it was made. Hops are great. I love them. They're very flavorful, very aromatic. They can cover up a lot within the liquid of a beer, crafting a beer that, flaws and different things like that, if you add enough hops, it just tastes like hops. And for sure, one of those people who that's all I drank. I think what's happened now, maybe some part of what you were saying was like this going back, when you said that, kind of made me think of like going back to styles, like classic styles that, I'm seeing a lot of breweries that are really like seasoned, or not, they take out the really just seasoned, like that, they're exploring lagers now, and they're exploring these classic styles to like the opposite of what was going on, to like amplify and distort, almost like, this heavy metal version. And now we're going back to more of this classical sound of just the purity of the recipe, and the simplicity of the ingredients, and the quality of like a beautifully made German Pilsner, local, fresh, boom, 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 hitting all these marks. And you're like, damn, that's really good. And it brings it back when it's made down the street even better. Now, it's like, that wasn't a cool that I knew about in 2010. Now
right.
It's like, that's what I want to explore.
Those things seem like very different to sell, right? One where you can just literally say this number is higher, so I'm telling it, so it's better, right? And so how do you, when you approach places to try to bring classical styles in, or something that's just more about balance, like how has your approach changed from the time when you were selling 150 IBU IPAs? Like, do you have to change how you're selling, or have the accounts changed what they're looking for, or what's evolved in that regard since in the time you've been in this world?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Cut out.
Oh, he's frozen a little bit. Let's see if he comes back.
He's about to say, "Ask an interesting question." Dang.
Or maybe that's the best question I've ever heard.
That's what. Yeah, that was probably the follow up.
That's the best question I've ever been asked. Let me see, where are we at here?
And distribution and supplies.
Hold on. We lost you for about 30 seconds.
Yeah, basically that entire thing. The internet
I was
cut
saying,
out.
like, I'm old, and like, I've been doing this to like involved in the distribution and supply side for 20 years. And before that, when I worked in the bars, that was a little different. It was like just me, just binge drinking and listening to music, because I had a music venue. But that's how I found craft. That's how I got into craft beer. But 20 years of doing it, got to see like things really change, and sometimes I don't really notice how you just put it, like as something where I could specifically point out and talk about it, until I think about it. Like when I was talking about when I was talking about selling IPAs back then, that was so organic to me, because that's the beers that I was getting into. And I'm old enough that I sold IPAs when it was like the weird beer, or no one wanted them. Like, amber ale was still like the predominant like microbrewery, and that's when microbreweries were kind of on their way out, and this craft beer term came into play, and that turned into more of like, oh, you make IPA, you make bitter beers, or weird beers. So when we first talked about IPAs, I was very passionate, so it was almost like just mansplaining a lot of times, because people didn't understand what the hell I was saying. An IBU was like total alien to anybody.
Sure.
And I read it just like I did the back of an album cover. Oh, you didn't know had Charles Mingus had all these side guys, and you rattle off all these goofy names that no one's ever heard of, and act like they're the one who's out of it. And it's like same thing with IPAs. I'd be like, oh, you don't know. Yeah, they use Amarillo, and it's 95 IBUs, and they're
right.
Your human palate can only taste up to like 8.
Yeah.
This is Jan. And they're like, so I can't taste anything? I'm like, no, I missed everything. And it's like, yeah, I just over explained it. But it was came from a very passionate place where people were like attracted to that. Like, oh man, beer, it made, we were so excited. So I think beer was really exciting. So the difference like that we're talking about now is I still have that same excitement, but it's more talking about like the process of the brewing and like the art of it. And I really learned to like chill out and learn from the breweries and our suppliers, or like help explain a lot of stuff, because I don't know until they explain it. And when you get that's when the brewers really come into play. When you get someone who's like a brewer who's just like really good at the art of what they do, their craft, and then can explain it in a way that like you can just parrot that out in the market and it translates perfectly. That's art. I mean, that's so cool. Like, because that's not always the case. Sometimes I have to translate, just like people didn't understand what the hell I was talking about when I was screaming at bar owners about, oh, you got to have, 190 IBU beer on. Some brewers will be like, oh, just going off and rattling off all these numbers and things like that. Like I should know, because I've been, I look like old enough that I should know everything about beer, or at least know what they're talking about. I don't. So when they can explain it to me, I'm like, shit. And I can do that at your bar or your store or to a room full of people, that's the best, is when you got like, you guys do like an event or something where we got 20 people, where I can transmit that, or amplify that, like that story that the brewer told me. That's why I think it's so important to this day that distributors continue to go to the breweries. And, we used to do it when I first got in this business. You'd go to Europe and, you'd go with, I got to go with Don Feinberg.
Oh yeah.
Van Berg de Wolf and got to go to Belgium trip. You might have gone on one of those, or I mean, when you go there, you come back and that's all you sell. I mean, I never sold so much Belgian beer, like it's just so rejuvenating. And I took my whole, I was just a sales rep on a team, but I took it upon myself to be the ambassador for Belgian beer for the state of Michigan when I was a distributor. And it's so important, like for us to visit the breweries and suppliers that we meet. And I think that's another thing that, COVID kind of hindered, was us actually visiting. And I think we're getting back to that, and we're getting back to events and bars and tastings and things like that, and really getting that touchy feeling and being immersed in the culture. Yeah. So the culture's changed.
Yeah. It's interesting that you're saying that, Aaron, because a lot of what you were saying before about like what you really like when you go to the breweries, and you can even go overseas and learn about that so you can transmit that information, is exactly what you hear distributors now, or for the past couple of years, saying that, they're not going to do. Don't rely on us to, communicate your story. We will fulfill your orders. We'll do the logistics. We'll make sure that it's fresh. We'll do all those things. But we're not going to, transmit any of this romance or the story or anything, do any sort of salesmanship beyond kind of order taking. And it's kind of become like this mantra, that like, don't expect your distributor to do any of that. And the distributor used to do that. Some of the craft-focused distributors really were doing that. And when the big distributors were scared and thought that craft was going to keep growing, they started doing it, and now they don't do that anymore. But it's interesting. It's almost like as the market starts to tighten a little bit, I see what I hear you saying is that, you're excited to kind of bring that style of distribution back again, and to have a distributor where you can talk about these beers to people. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it certainly seems like something that's valuable to a small distributor who maybe can't hire
small brewery.
A small brewery that can't have a permanent rep. Maybe they can have representation come through every so often, but maybe they can't have somebody like in Chicago. Maybe they can have a a regional person, or maybe not even that. And it's nice to have a distributor partner do that. I mean, do you see that as kind of a role that you hope to play with Oath, or is that not really something you're interested in?
Yeah, I think that's like, I think that was part of the original business plan. I mean, that was certainly what I set out to do when I did the consulting business. So I did that for I was able to maintain that for 3 years, which I was hired by distributors, I was hired by breweries, I was hired by anyone just to offer experience of, like, what I had done on all those different tiers. And so when I wrote the original business plan, I wrote that in is because that was what I felt is like, I felt like I was an extension of these breweries that I was representing, because they couldn't afford to have a rep in every market, but I could go in and use experience and connections that I had with distributors or retailers or whatever, because I was lucky enough to have some jobs where I was traveling a lot and got to meet so many people, and I got that experience. I mean, that was all luck, and just absorbing that. I mean, I learned so much more now because I shut up a little bit more than I used to, but in listen, because there's so much to learn from everybody, even people who are just starting out. Like, they have so much to teach us about how they're doing things, because sometimes what they do becomes like the thing that happens like in the here and now. Like, right. If you talk about what's going on here and now with like a business like ours or distribution, it's like we don't just sell beer, and breweries are no longer just making beer. They're making natural wines, and they're making seltzers, or they're making these other beverages. They're beverage makers. They're craft beverage makers. This evolution, a lot of them are becoming into, going into that. And then there's a split too, where there's breweries that they're just going very traditional, and they're only making a certain kind of like traditional style beer. And it's exciting if you look at it from that growth mindset of like, this is really cool to watch, rather than going, oh, I don't like those guys because they're just too much into making German beers, and they don't do anything else. And these guys are too weird. Like, they'll put anything in a tank and ferment it. But the idea that could happen is going to create these expressions of beverages that that are going to inspire, like, things that people want. And so we that's our job is in tier 2 is to get it out and work with retailers that want it. Who's out there? Like, there are places that want this stuff. The bigger distributors, as you were pointing out, they don't always call them. Those aren't always their biggest accounts. Like, my biggest accounts are not their biggest accounts.
Sure.
So without them, I don't exist. Like, that's the great thing about the big distributors. Like, we don't exist. I want to go back to something you said just before came back from the break, or maybe before the break, about, like, do you think that this is like the indie distro is like a big thing or emerging thing? I believe that too. I believe it that I think there'll be a lot more of us, because I don't think that I don't think there's enough distribution. Like, I think there should be 20 little distributors in Chicago.
Why is that?
If that's my opinion.
Yeah.
Because I think there's only so much bandwidth that, like, I can have to do what you were saying. And I'm getting like ahead of myself because I'm so excited with these thoughts. I didn't finish my thought about going back to that, that teaching, about the supply, the breweries and the suppliers we represent. I do think that's important. I don't know if that's where everything's going to go. I have no idea if that's what people want. I just think that's what I want. Like, I want to know, like, if I come into Beer Temple, I know if I ask a question, I'm going to learn everything about whatever I ask about. Who makes this beer? Like, I could ask the dumbest question, and it's going to get a very thorough answer, and probably lead me into other things too if I listen well enough. Like, oh, well, they make this style, and this brewer, it's the brewer from so and so, and now he's got his own thing, and it's called this. And oh shit, well, give me that brewery too, and this kind of thing. Like, that's me. So I'm not everybody. So we try to be the answer for people who like what we like. But not everyone likes what I like. I'm not for everybody. So there's got to be like 20 other distributors that can fit that personality, and then to have the bandwidth to sell that with passion. Because
Mhm.
there's things that I'm not going to be able to sell with passion. We turn down a lot of brands, not because I think that they're not good enough to be. There's never this like they're not good enough to be with us. I think everyone who's out there who's in this business right now deserves to be in it because it's hard. Um, and I think we're not the right fit. You know, it's
Mhm.
just simple. It's like that old adage, like take everything and just whatever sells, people will pull it through. That's not always the case because there's not enough distributors. I mean, there's the the supplier tier is over 10,000, and the consolidation on tier two is been to the point where we have less options than we did 10 years ago with 10 times the breweries.
Right. Yeah. No, I think we've talked about I've harped on that quite a bit. Less so in the past year than maybe previous years, where there were 10,000 breweries, and I felt like and less styles seemingly available, even though as Mike you would say that they're probably out there in greater quantity, but there's just no access to get them, because they're just
in tap rooms.
in some tiny tap room in Nebraska somewhere,
Right.
and
St. Louis,
right,
where all the brown ales are.
which I mean we're hoping to get some of them brown ales up here. More on that soon. But
My dad.
oh, okay. But yeah, it's interesting. So getting back to it, so it sounds like the reason you think that there should be 20 small distributors in a market like Chicago is because it takes that many distributors to have like your portfolio needs to be small enough that you are intimately familiar with all your breweries and can talk to them intimately, and that kind of necessitates this kind of more boutique kind of experience.
We went through an era when there was a distributor here that was doing their best, but they started with as a craft focused distributor, and then they ended up with like 200 brands in their book, and it's just like, how can you possibly sell that many?
Yeah, and then they sold to Reyes.
Right. As
It's hard. It's
what
hard,
often
and
does.
then it's hard not to it's hard not to sell. So, but I think it goes back to something you might have said, Chris, or we said in the conversation that like those days of like these big deals. I mean, both on the supplier side, these $1 billion deals. That happened in tier two too, as well, because those rights get passed along, and there's a purchase price on that. So I think those deals are gone too. So I'm a lot of the brands that we represent. I'm not gonna put my kids through college on the brand rights to them. So let's have some fun. Like let's do some stuff that like bring some stuff in that is that's gonna make some people happy. Certainly make them happy because they get to see their beer in a market like Chicago. Like everybody still wants to be in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
That when I came here, there wasn't a lot of local breweries. I think the self-distribution laws or rules that came out, like I got to be here when that happened, blossomed into like these breweries, like going into an alley and seeing like a Beguile and Spiteful like across the alleyway from each other, and just all of a sudden there's like these great breweries, and it was just like yes, and then like Juan Kim's underground brewery thing. I don't know if that's something to talk about. Like
yeah.
They were awesome. They were like beer raves. I mean, I remember bringing like the guys from Stone in, like, you got to see what's going on in Chicago. There's nowhere else in the country this is going on. It's about to explode. It's just here's the bubbling. It's like the fermentation was those events where it's like, we love this so much. We're doing this kind of stuff. And that's what always got me going about Chicago. And I say you because I'm like a visitor. I'm not, I wasn't born here, and I've lived on and off here for 10 years. But and so I'm a fan. So when I look at it, I'm like, what you guys did here, no one else in the country has done. It's awesome.
What do you mean by that?
Just like coming to Chicago before This what I look at as this local boom is like being from an out of state brewery was like that was like the big market, like the last big market, because
Right. We're a little behind, I felt like, a lot of the big markets, the big beer markets anyway.
Totally. And I think
which helped us ultimately.
What's that? Oh, I'm sorry.
And I think that helped us ultimately, being a little bit late to the brew scene. And I think it made us one of the last big markets, and also made it an opportunity for local breweries to start up here. But I interrupted you. You were talking about how nobody was doing or has done what Chicago did or was doing. But it sounds like an interesting story you're about to tell. So
that was the thought. Was like, I mean, you said it there. To me, it was like everybody's just wanted to come in this market, be a part of this market, and when the local breweries came out of it, they were excited about these out of state breweries coming in. Like, you would get treated like you were a local brewery if you were from California, if you were from the East Coast, wherever you're from, you got treated really well here, like a local brewery would get treated. And then you saw this scene explode. It's like everyone just took notes and just took the best parts of all the influence from all the breweries around the country and created their own thing. Like the hazy IPA that's in Illinois is like not like anything else in the United States. And I've been watching that like on and off, and it's like it's only like, I don't see a lot of other IPAs. They have a hard time, like hazy IPAs, thriving here because there's such a local taste for it. But when you take that out to other markets, they don't know what to do with it. Like in I'm not beating up on Michigan, but it's like way too extreme for them. It's like it blows their mind. Like it's like it's almost like they can't handle these breweries. And I was just like, dude, no one's doing this beer like Illinois. Barrel aged stouts. Oh my God. Like that's such a Chicago thing. It's like, you can't deny that influence across the country and the world. I mean, we get Siren Brewery in England, and their barrel age program is just mimicking, not minimizing. No, that's saying but
yeah,
I can't say that the boom that a brewery like Goose Island made with that program and the talent that exploded out of that barrel age program that's out there now with the brewers that are doing what they're doing with their own breweries here in Chicago is pretty significant.
Yeah, I think you're still seeing that too with places like the lager game in the Chicagoland area is insane right now with Afterthought and Metro and Goldfinger and kind of like I'm sure there's other ones I'm missing, but and like the
Afterthought.
Did I say Afterthought? What did I meant? Art History.
And
there's also like saisons are incredibly. To drink saison here is as good as place anywhere else anywhere in the world with like Afterthought and Off Color and.
Was.
I wasn't gonna say it, but like you're seeing like that extend into even just style here, where people are getting really making world class versions of each style of beer. Like that's now happening everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mike, let me ask you: like, where do you see small indie distro playing a part in helping the beer scene grow, not just in Chicago, but nationally? I mean, I'm using Oath and Aaron as an example in our market, but I think really what I'm trying to get at is what, why, or if you think indie distro is uniquely important or valuable, and if so, why?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it absolutely isn't, especially for a brewery like. I can only speak to my brewery for that for the most part, but we make, one very specific type of beer that has very diehard fans of it. Like it's not going to, no Reyes extension is going to want to bring in any of our beer at any point, but I'm sure there's times when we'll drop beer in other states and it will go for a small, like a tiny amount of beer, and it will be for a small amount of people, but it will, absolutely go through an independent distributor. And then, I mean, I would never even consider like distributing anything I would make through a distributor that doesn't align with our ethos, and independent distribution aligns with our ethos much more. And I feel like most breweries that have come of age in the last like 5 years probably feel the same way. Because the idea of the infinite growth that was there in 2012 and the open field running Tony McGee talked about on this show in probably 2014 is just not true anymore, and hasn't been for quite a while. So the idea that you're going to align yourself with the Bud or the Miller cluster, and then that's going to make your purchase value even better when you sell to them, is like that's just not how anyone reasonably is thinking anymore.
Yeah.
So like having someone who actually understands the beer you're making, or at least that is open to you talking about it with them, and then, behaves in a way economically and ethically that is more aligned with how your brewery operates is incredibly important.
I'll say I think that, and I am highly, highly biased here, but I think like independent distribution is going to and independent I'll say like specialty distributors and specialty retailers and specialty brewers. Let's just put it all group us all together.
Yeah.
Are going to be really important if we want to keep this excitement that Aaron's been talking about. I don't think that excitement is needed for craft beer to survive, but I think for the craft beer that we care about to survive, it is needed.
Yeah.
There's going to be I know we're joking about it, but the fatheads will be around no matter what, and at this point the Half Acres and the Revs and breweries like that. But when you start getting into the afterthoughts and the was and and people of the smaller size, the specialty, the lager breweries that you're talking about, and those are the ones that a lot of people are getting excited about. The fruited sours, there are people who are really into that sort of stuff. The over hopped, super hop, dank IPAs, people are really into that stuff. The esoteric imports, people are really into that sort of stuff. It's a very small,
but very passionate.
Yes, and that's the sort of stuff that I think excites the three of us, and I think we need these specialty segments to make, distribute, and sell it. And I think that's going to be important if we're going to keep this kind of heart and soul. And I think that is going to be, or certainly could be, an engine that, keeps the bigger guys excited and wanting to be part of this thing too, other than it just being I make widgets and the widgets I make are liquid alcoholic ones, you know. And my widgets are hoppier.
Then IPA just becomes light lager at some point, right? Where it's this is just a commodity that happens to be slightly different than that one.
Right.
And if the uniqueness from the ground up or whatever you want to put starts fading away and doesn't have outlets and doesn't have distribution, then it all suffers.
Right. And even the big guys, it could influence them. I know I think those the big guys now were the influencers when they were smaller, and they're influencers in their own way now. But like Goose Island, you were bringing up, you mentioned earlier, and their Aaron and their barrel age program. They were a huge influencer, still are. But I think these little breweries are the ones that can, inspire some of the bigger guys to we're gonna play around with one or two beers this year, and this year we're gonna do maybe something that was inspired by them, and they can't all be historical beers like our friend Mike Siegel loves to do, and God bless him for doing it. But I think it's the kind of the small heart / engine of this thing. If we want it to kind of stay vibrant, it's not going to be these big regional breweries. I just don't think they have it in them right now. I just don't think that's the role that they're meant to play. I think it's the little guys, the indies, and the passionate fans, and hopefully it kind of radiates out to varying degrees, depending on how much people care about it. So I'm super excited for Oath and other distributors around the country. I feel super fortunate to be in Chicago, where we have specialty retailers, specialty brewers, specialty distributors. We get these letters from people who are, they're just they're wastelands compared to places like Chicago.
Well, I was on another podcast that was asking what's
what? Wait, hold on. Search, stop recording, please.
One of the questions they asked is what makes Chicago. Well, this is like a food specific podcast, so dining and then beer scene unique and great. And honestly, a lot of that has to do with distribution. And Chicago, it was imports for a long time, and that's part of the reason we were so far behind in the American craft beer, but the consumer was so far ahead in what their palate was interested in, right? It's probably the original seeds for why we can have these specialty saison makers or specialty lager makers that get so deep and so specific on things, is because there's still that remnants of this being a huge heft town for forever, instead of it being just we drink Bud Light only, Miller Lite. And certainly there's a lot of that happens here, but there was all this other imported beer that wasn't really in the rest of the country, most of the rest of the country.
We just drank. Chicago was a beer city. I don't know. I mean, I think Michigan probably was too, Aaron, but Philadelphia was not as much of a beer town, even though it is one of the originators, I think, of craft beer culture, certainly on the East Coast.
Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's named after. The founding father of craft beer culture.
Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah, Benjamin Franklin. But it just wasn't. The general population was not drinking beer the same way that people in Chicago were. I remember moving here and being like, oh my gosh, women drink beer here. I don't know, and
sex that you're gonna get us canceled.
I remember saying this was 20-something years ago, and it was true. Yeah. It was just women drank more beer here than they did in Philadelphia at that time. Yeah,
Chicago,
right? I thought it was cool. I obviously thought it was cool.
I look at if you talk about that's interesting about Philly. I love hearing about I would have never guessed that women didn't drink beer. That's what I got from it, because I know that's not what you're saying.
Yeah.
But Michigan was it was all about Michigan beers, local beers, even 25, 30 years ago, because it was just, it goes back so far. So I would drive with friends when I was 16 to see the Bad Brains at the Vic Theater. And then at 23, drove to the Hop Leaf to try a Belgian beer made with mustard seed that the legend was that it got its own seat on a plane. It's got its own plane ticket. It was I drove all the way from, 4.5, 5 hour drive to get to see this beer. That's Chicago. There was
beer. I know the one, the Worcestershire beer. I've had it there. Yeah.
Wow.
It was so special. We just heard about it. And you drive there and it was worth it. It was never not worth it. And it was only happening in Chicago. You drive to Ohio, you went to Cedar Point. There wasn't I didn't go anywhere else in out of state to go have beers, but Chicago, it was just such weird stuff was happening there. That culture is your culture that just is so unique, to take those, to be able to have access to those beers. Cause I think you would be you in Belgium. And I think that's still true today, with what's going on at Beer Temple. And, it's just, you keep that culture going. You're maintaining that culture of when you hear, I'm not surprised. I've often traveled when we were starting Oath here, traveled to Beer Temple just to try beers and learn about what was I went to Beer Temple to learn about what Chicago beer scene was what I'd missed. To catch up, I went to the bottle shop and bought a bunch of stuff and just tried to immerse in it, because I know there it's a curated, the shelves are curated. I'm going to try stuff there, and everything's going to have a story, and everything's going to have, a uniqueness, and it's quality, So I think that is something you just pointed out, we exist for each other, as long as everyone's doing their part, we pull it through. Supplier, distributor, store, and then the consumer. You know, like as long as they're buying it, you know, what do you guys want to see? What do you want to see as a retailer? Do you want reps who come in there and know a lot about the products you're selling? Then we exist for that. But
Right.
you know, if that's not needed, then we're only what's needed. You know, we're only there to serve what's needed because it's about passion, and you know, it's not about making $1 billion. You know, I wish some days it was.
Sure,
but
sure.
it's happening.
Yeah, I've said it more and more the last couple months that you know I think the hard times are not over, but I also think that there's going to be some really cool beers to be had, and I think for a connoisseur, for a beer drinker and a connoisseur, and someone who's willing to look for stuff, and I don't mean stand in line, I don't mean to go trading, I just mean to look, you know, spend a little bit of time in their local area looking for stuff. And you know what? If this is wrong, guys, this is a nice maybe call for letters, because what I was going to say is I feel like it's a better time now, and it's going to continue, I hope, to get better for just special beers that are like everyday special beers, you know, or not even everyday special beers, but just special beers that are just like waiting for you when you get to the shop or waiting for you when you get to the restaurant, you know, not ones that you have to line up at the brewery for. You go to a restaurant or a bar that's known for beer, there's going to be something really cool waiting for you if you make that trip to that place.
And if you explore a little bit, right? If you don't just drink the same 3 hops, same styles of beer all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's only going to I see it continuing in that way for the, you know, at least the short term, and I hope it continues past that. But you know, we get in our own little bubble here, and sometimes people correct us via the letters. So that might be a good call if you're out there, and it's not like that in your market. You don't see things growing. You don't see more access to style than you did, let's say, 3 years ago. Let us know. That's something that I'm very interested about in some of these other markets. You know, as craft beer cools off, and it isn't like the new thing anymore. It isn't the next thing anymore in some of these smaller markets. What does that look like for you guys who are, obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, who are still into craft beer? Is it getting harder? Do you have to go and spend that extra money to get it shipped to you from online?
Tavour the only place you can
Is
go?
Tavour the only place to go? Which is, you know, to me, again, very biased. You know, I guess you could have your friends come over and you guys can all sit around and open up these boxes and explore that way. But I think it's different than like going to a bar or going to a store and kind of experiencing it that way. But,
Sure.
But anyway.
Might be the only way you can get the beers.
Yeah. So, but anyway, let us know. We're at insiders@craftbeertemple.com if you want to send an electronic letter.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you want to send an actual letter, we're at the Beer Temple, 3173 North Elston Avenue, ELSTON in Chicago, 60618. And you can send it to Serge's attention or to one of the Dust Brothers, Buster or Dusty. Send it to King Kona. Yeah. I mean, it'll still get here.
He hasn't gotten letters in a while.
Not in a
Maybe they've been going to the
long time.
Hovercraft, which is still in the shop. That's at the Jewelers.
We have to get down there. We have to get back down to Kona Land down on in Bridgeport.
In Bridgeport?
Yeah, we got to do that.
Coconut Grove in Bridgeport.
Yeah, you get back down to the Coconut Grove down there. But yeah, I would love to hear what you guys have to say about that. Yeah. Anything else you would like to add, Mike, before we get out of here? Is there anything we've missed?
No, I just want to thank Aaron for coming on.
Yeah. Aaron, is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, I
what
could
we
go
had to
on
say.
with you guys for a long time, and
Yeah,
I mean,
we'll have
just-
you on again. This won't. But this doesn't need
yeah,
to
I
be
mean,
the last.
that would be fun. No, I mean, this has been really great. I mean, we're kind of like the invisible force that most people, if you're not, if you're not in the industry, don't really understand how beer gets to the
Yeah.
stores. So, like they don't see it. So it's nice to talk about it, and
Yeah.
there's it's a lot, but this is fun, just talking to you guys, and we all have the same kind of like we're into the same things.
Yeah.
And it's cool to share that fellowship.
One day we'll get more than one of you on a call.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
That I really would. I would love to come back.
We'll
for
do
that.
it. We'll do
so
it.
forward to talking to those guys. I think there's something that's unique with small indie distros. Is like a lot of us either know each other or definitely know of each other.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I share a lot of stuff with other distributors in other states, and about brands and what's this doing for you? Have you heard of these guys? How's this going? And that's been really helpful. And if it wasn't for my friends in other states that doing the same thing, wouldn't be doing this. And it reminds me of craft brewers, like brewers lending hops, and the brewery owners might be fighting on social media, but the brewers, the actual brewers in the back, are lending each other ingredients or
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you get
so
enough.
it's similar. Like it's fun to call up and say, "Hey, what kind of vans are you using? Like what's all those things die after 200,000 miles or whatever." So those are kind of stuff we talk about. But I guess I do have a lot to talk about, but I won't because I want to come back. When you guys have a panel, I'd love to do that. And just great to be here with you guys. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's fun when you get a bunch of brewers together. It always devolves into who committed the biggest OSHA violation.
We won't talk about that.
Yeah, we'll leave
Yeah.
that. That'll be the Patreon episode. Who committed the biggest
Yeah.
OSHA violation at the indie distributors?
Yeah. Secret. The answer is none.
None. Yeah, zero.
Yeah, always.
Never won.
Yes. Well,
Yeah, thank you so much for
Yeah,
being on.
thanks, Aaron. It's been a fun time, and we will be back next week. We've got quite a special show. I think I alluded to it for maybe I said this week or last week or something like that, but we ended up pushing it out. So we're gonna have a show about the rise and fall of American wild ales. And the reason that we pushed it out, because I think I said we're going to have this next week several weeks ago, but there was a good reason for it because we've got a huge panel. I would say the
Let's not jinx it.
the heaviest hitting panel we've had. I can jinx.
Let's not
I mean,
jinx it and have them go all indie distributors on us and cancel in the last.
no, these people are
Just kidding.
have all agreed to be on. So we're going to have John Laffler.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have Paul Arney of Ale Apothecary, Ron Jeffries, formerly of Jolly Pumpkin, and we're going to have Vinny Salerzo of Russian River all on, as well as you and me, Mike. We'll be the most interesting people
That's
on that
right.
panel.
Well, we will monopolize the conversation with bits and jokes about Benjamin Danklin and not let them speak.
Yes. We'll have to remember to keep that. We'll have to have like a little like taser or something that
You just
or a
tase
cattle
me.
prod, a cattle prod.
Serge,
that
if I start
Serge
talking
can
about
just, like,
Benjamin Danklin, just get me.
yeah. So that's exciting for next week. But yeah. But we'll see you guys then. One last time, thanks to our guest Aaron Tyrell of Oath Distribution, and we'll see you next week. So long.
Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember this is what we wanted.